Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 1, The Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile. Remember, countenance means facial expression, and rugged countenance reveals that he has a rough, messy-looking face. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, in his personality. Backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. So notice in this first sentence how he is described as being very negative on the outside. He looks unfriendly, but in fact, at the end of the sentence, it says, and yet he's somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beaconed from his eye, something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. So, the way he truly felt never really came out in the way he talked to people. It was mainly in just the way he acted and the way he behaved. He was austere with himself, drank gin when he was alone to mortify a taste for vintage, and though he enjoyed the theater, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering almost with envy at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than to reprove. Now remember, he's an attorney, and so the author is going on to describe his persona as tolerating others. And he thought a lot about the spirits and the pressures that would pressure the bad decisions of those whom he represented, the ones who fell on ill fortune. And he always found himself inclined to help them rather than to judge them. I incline to Cain's heresy, he used to say quaintly. I let my brother go to the devil in his own way. In this character, it was frequently his fortune to be the last reputable acquaintance and the last good influence in the lives of down-going men. And to such as these, so long as they came about his chambers, he never marked a shade of change in his demeanor. He always acted on the up and up. He never changed the way he treated people. I want to take you back up into the paragraph and lead you to the biblical allusion of Cain and Abel. If you're not familiar with that, you might want to Google it to look at the story of Cain and Abel, because the author is referring to that Bible story when he says, I incline to Cain's heresy. No doubt the feat was easy to Mr. Utterson, for he was undemonstrative at the best, and even his friendships seemed to be founded in a similar catholicity of good nature. It is the mark of a modest man to accept his friendly circle, ready-made from the hands of opportunity, and that was the lawyer's way. His friends were those of his own blood, he was related to them, or those whom he had known the longest. His affections, like ivy, were the growth of time. They implied no aptness in the object. Hence, no doubt, the bond that united him to Mr. Richard Enfield, his distant kinsman, the well-known man about town. It was a nut to crack for many. This means it was a mystery for many people, what these two could see in each other, or what subject they could find in common. It was reported by those who encountered them in their Sunday walks that they said nothing, looked singularly dull, and would hail with obvious relief the appearance of a friend. For all that, the two men put the greatest store by these excursions. They looked forward to these walks, counted them the chief jewel of each week, and not only set aside occasions of pleasure, but even resisted the calls of business, that they might enjoy them uninterrupted. It chanced on one of these rambles that their way led them down a by street in a busy quarter of London. The inhabitants were all doing well. This was in the shopping district, mind you. They were all doing well, it seemed, and all emulously hoping to do better still, and laying out the surplus of their gains in coquetry. So that the shop fronts stood along that thoroughfare with an air of invitation, like rows of smiling saleswomen. Even on Sunday, when it veiled its more florid charms and lay comparatively empty of passage, the street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighborhood, like a fire in a forest, and with its freshly painted shutters, well polished brasses, and general cleanliness and gaiety of note, instantly caught and pleased the eye of the passenger.